I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Alison Black. Bringing nearly a decade of experience working with Cleveland's youth and families, Alison leads Cleveland Scores with a vision to expand the program's reach and ensure that every child, regardless of background, has access to a high-quality after-school experience. Cleveland Scores kicked off in 2004 with just 4 partner schools and 120 students. Before becoming executive director, Allison served as the organization's associate director for several years. She holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Dayton and a master's degree in social administration from Case Western Reserve University. Allison is passionate about building strategic community partnerships and advocating for equitable opportunities for Cleveland's youth. As a Cleveland Bridge builder in the class of 2021, Allison shared her civic vision to work with youth from underserved communities, especially in the after-school space. That was during COVID when the need was increased and the resources to offer such services were down. It was 6 years ago when she encouraged her classmates to join her in that work, and she has been forging ahead ever since. It is my pleasure to introduce to you all today, Alison Black.
Hi, guys. Thank you, Angela, for the introduction. I'm going to share a brief PowerPoint, so hopefully everything works and it's good to go. But I'm really excited to be here. And like Angela said, from Bridge Builders, have always been really passionate about scores, but also really passionate about after school and also collaboration. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about Cleveland Scores, but then I'm also going to move in and talk about a coalition of a group of great nonprofits, 5 very small but mighty leaders doing similar work and how we've started working together to really move ahead and to try to think about what is next for Cleveland youth and to make sure Cleveland youth don't get left behind, especially when we talk about sports and how America really is about pay to play and who has the resources versus sport being an agent and using for change and good and joy for kids. So with that, I will get started. All right. So what is Cleveland Scores? And I should also say Cleveland Scores up until a month ago was always called America Scores Cleveland. And we're actually going back into our roots to say Cleveland Scores. People really, truly, we want to make sure everybody knows our first mission and priority is always here in Cleveland. We are a part of a national network called the Scores Network that spans between 13 cities between the United States and Canada. And that also is why we've dropped the America and gone back to city scores. So if you hear me interchangeably say America Scores, or I'm still learning Cleveland Scores as we are just going through all of that change. But so Cleveland Scores inspires youth to lead healthy lives, be engaged students, and have the confidence and character to make a difference in the world. And so what does that mean? How do we do that? I think when we talk to people, a lot of people go, okay, you guys are a soccer program and you just throw literacy in there. You throw some of this character development. But really, truly, we are a youth development program first using soccer as the hook, but everything is equal. And how we do that is through soccer, poetry, and service learning. So soccer, the most popular game in the world, maybe not the most popular here in the United States, but there is a thing called the World Cup coming to America and Canada and Mexico. So hopefully more people will be engaged with soccer. But soccer really teaches kids, and truly any sport teaches kids commitment, leadership, teamwork, and it keeps kids healthy and active. We also know there is an issue. Kids are on a lot of screens at a lot of times. And so throughout this, also, Scores does not use any screens to do our programming. And I think that is key right now as we start to see how much kids use computers and screens. And so soccer is our sport, but we also make the kids do a literacy component. And so in the fall, that literacy component is poetry. They write poems, they're learning about poetry, and then they perform a huge poetry slam at the end in partnership. We have a great partner with Cleveland State. And so the kids get up on stage. So there's 8, 9, and 10-year-olds coming up on stage and using their voice for good. And we really, truly see poetry as that way. It is one of the oldest forms to express yourself. And so this also is helping kids use their voice for good. How do you write out your feelings? How do you express who you are and how you feel, what you're seeing and witnessing? And they do that through poetry. So after the fall season is done, we flip this literacy curriculum to be a service learning curriculum. And so within that, they're really truly learning about being engaged citizens. What does it mean to be part of community? And then they do a service project. SCORES runs first through eighth grade. So our first through fifth graders are with us for 22 weeks, 4 days a week. And then our sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, we do a spring only program because most of them are doing soccer in the fall through their schools. And so we really, again, that 2 days of soccer, 2 days of literacy, and we don't let kids pick and choose. So you are a team on the field, in the classroom, and off the field. If kids are skipping out of, we're not naive to know kids are going to skip out of their literacy section, but that means you can't play in the soccer. And that, we really hold coaches true to that as well, because it's not just about sport, it's really about building the holistic child. So this is our reach in Cleveland. We are currently in 17 schools. We just added a new school this spring, and we're spread out, but also you see that we always make sure schools have another school within their neighborhood. And this is so the kids can play games against each other. It's easier on staff. Our east side, unfortunately, is a little bit more spread out than we would like, but we also recognize these are neighborhoods that kids truly need programming. So we do this through 5 full-time staff, 2 part-time, and then we have 50 to 60 70 coaches at any given time with us. And those coaches, over 80% are educators from the building. So we pride ourselves in training these educators to coach, but they're mentors and they also know the kids really well. So we have a far reach across the city of Cleveland, and it is, resources are very hard, and you continue to do more with less, but we really feel the value of kids deserve to have access. So, just a little bit of research, because I want to preface, when we're talking about sport, we're not talking about the pay to play model. We're not talking about kids who have access to everything under the sun and their parents can sign them up. SCORES runs right after school on school grounds for many reasons. And one is it reduces the barrier. If a family is working, having an extra 75 minutes after school actually is a huge piece for them, but it also means they don't have to transport their child somewhere. And we also see we lose kids when we don't run on school grounds, because then it becomes drop-in. But just a little bit of research is 24% of kids from homes of $25,000 or less, and that's a huge portion of Cleveland, play less sports on a regular basis versus 40% of kids from $100,000 income. And that you look at that, like that even means that separates them even just from like the inner ring suburbs of Cleveland. And that jumps even more because wealthy families are even 4 times more likely to spend money on sports. And just a relative lack of access. And actually the research after COVID is Hispanic and Black youth. This is even less kids participating than pre-COVID. And, we know all the statistics also about screens. Kids are on screens about 7.5 hours per day. And then another research had come out that kids are only outside in free play for about 7 minutes, but that doesn't equate to also like organized sport. But screen time is a big issue. And then we also know that often kids in under-resourced communities don't even have access. And we also know sports can change lives in kids, because kids who play sports are 2 times as more likely to have healthy lifestyles later as adults. So we're looking at trickle-down effects of even just exposing a kid into sport by the age of 6 or 7. They are more likely to stay in sport, they're more likely to try sport, and they're more likely to have stronger school attendance, stronger engagement in school. And that's for Cleveland. And what we're trying to do is we need our kids in school because our kids need to know how to read. And so we see ourselves as part of a larger system, and we're just one piece of the puzzle, but it's really important to us. So why SCORES? Why this youth development piece? And why not just normal, right? Just come out, teach the kids soccer. That's what, a lot of rec centers do, which is great. But why SEL infused programs matter, and why we, really truly push this. And I hope if everybody leaves, there's one, you take the one thing is that sports can change lives. And I recognize when we look at where we're currently at and kids don't have food access and families are struggling to work, it's really hard to think about sports. But when we think about what sports can do in the long term, and when we teach kids these basic skills of teamwork, showing up, stronger attendance into school, we're actually looking at better outcomes later in life. So just, so there's a lot of things here, but we see a boost in academic outcomes. But for me, something that people are really shocked by is a recent study had come out that 94% of female corporate executives identify as an athlete and said they played sports. And so when we talk about our girls, like this is really important. It actually can improve especially a girl's life, but any child's life, especially in low income neighborhoods, because they may not actually be able to afford it. I did not mention scores is completely free to a child to play. So we do not charge the families, we do not charge the child. We kit them out so they feel like soccer players, and we make sure they have everything they need to for the classroom. So we also don't expect our educators to be paying for anything. But the kids, they show up to game day, they're in socks, shin guards, socks, shorts, jerseys. We try to give them all cleats or shoes that they can wear out on the field. They show up to writing, their pencils, their workbooks, their crayons, everything they need is provided, because that should not be the barrier to being in the program. And actually, we're pretty much free to the schools as well, because we also know Cleveland is dealing with a lot of budget issues. And so that, when we have conversations with school, we say what we want is the partnership. We need to make sure you're invested and involved. And so if you can write us a little bit into your budget, but it is not the make or break to being in a school. The whole point is to make sure these kids have this quality after school program. And so that is, we really stand true to that. We'll never leave the city of Cleveland, or we'll never not be serving the population who needs us most. So that is part of our scores network. And that's really, I thrive on that, because I also think when we see kids, if 4 times wealthy families are spending on sport, we also then are seeing that means those kids are 4 times more ahead. Then, it's not just school, because they need to go to school, but they also need other opportunities to do well. So the other piece of this is this sports coalition that we started. And really, this is the organizations, I think, I can't see everybody who's on the call, but Advantage Cleveland, Tennis and Education, Beat the Streets Cleveland, which is wrestling, Scores, which is soccer, First Tee Golf, and Urban Squash. And, I said, I'm not here to share a perfectly defined model that we figured out, and this coalition is like at the peak of its game, but we're really trying to figure out and trust each other in the process. And I kept thinking of bridge builders and our lab project and being told, just trust the process, just trust it. And it's still being developed. And I think that's okay. And people are really, truly, wanting to work together, because what happened is, we all started having coffee together because we were struggling. We're nonprofits. We have very different mission and models than sometimes just typical sports programs. We have boards, we have grants that we have to write, we have social emotional curriculum we have to implement. We have to show that we're doing something. We can't just show up and not have metrics. And so the 5 of us really started. So this is our history of how we started. And it came, over the course of time, we've always worked together. During COVID, we had some pop-up clinics. But as we started meeting for coffee and just sharing and learning from each other, we also started figuring out, well, if we could do this together, we can't make change individually or in silos. And yes, we can still run our own organizations. And yes, we still have a lot that we need to do on our own. But together, we're allowed our voice together to make true changes and to really push back on some of this. Sports is optional, but when we look at back and we say, but sports really isn't optional. And so in early 24, late 24, early 25, we started connecting with other cities who started doing coalition work to learn from them. And then we decided we should do something. The 5 of us are sitting together having coffee. So how do we do this? We don't completely know, but we know that things need to change. And we know that in Cleveland, we have to work together. And we know other people need to be brought along, and we don't know how to do that, but let's try it. And so we connected with Positive Coaching Alliance, who's now helping us do some equity study. We're in phase 2 of this landscape analysis. So where are sports happening? Where are they not happening? Where are barriers? Where are gaps? And how do we kind of push this system along? So this is our framework for collaboration. It's, at the very heart of this, and I cannot stress this enough, is that all 5 of us, we were all leaders of the organization. We trusted each other. And we felt like we could show up to these meetings being really vulnerable. So if I was having a funding issue, I could talk to them, and one person could share who their funder was. And there wasn't this Yes, we're all looking at the same pot of money, but it felt like we were not competing. It was if all of us can work together, it just means more kids have access to more opportunity, not that it's going to take away from scores or it's going to take away from beat the streets. Like we really truly trust each other, and to do that was the first step. And then it came to we have a shared vision and language. We're really transparent with each other. We're okay being different. We're different sports. We're different ways of modeling. We all have, national networks that kind of help us through or have curriculum, but also we want to celebrate together where we're winning and where we're all kind of moving forward. And then this collective advocacy and action, because five voices is a lot louder than one. Um, and so why now? So why did this happen? So here's the five leaders, and then Ryan, who's be with Positive Coaching Alliance. We did a coach training where all of our coaches showed up to learn about positive youth development, because there's also this challenge of coaches need to be trained not on how to win. Coaches need to be trained on how to work with kids. And so we're that was our first thing. Let's just train coaches together, because it doesn't matter the sport. These coaches just need to know how to work with kids. But then now, as community needs are growing more complex, funding is tighter, it's more competitive. Really, truly systematic challenges alone cannot be changed by one entity, and collaboration is no longer optional. And so, and there is an increase of focus on youth and access to sports, because we're starting to see mental health and health in kids, and so sport is part of that. So this is our shared vision, and I'm not going to go through it all, but we really have this shared vision that every child in Cleveland should and will have access to high quality sports experiences that promote positive youth development, equity, and lifelong well-being. What we hope comes next is a greater roadmap for investment into Cleveland, less silos, funding that's more sustainable for all of us, increased access, and advocacy, and a clear message that sports is not just a sport. It's youth development, it's workforce readiness, it's community well-being. And we cannot stop. We can't just start youth sports at high school level. We have to think younger, but we also have to think what it does for the long term. So this is my soapbox, but also I really believe in it, is organizations that provide sports-based youth development are just not nice to have, and that the evidence is clear that access to quality SEL programs shape long-term health, academic, and workforce readiness, and that it's not charity just investing in youth sports, but it's a strategic investment in our city's talent. So that's a little bit about scores and a little bit about the coalition and what we're all hoping to do.
That's awesome, Allison. Thank you so much for walking us through that. And thank you so much for being a leader who understands the value of collaboration and maybe risk taking too. I mean, that's maybe a scary thing that you're doing, letting other organizations in and, even getting into the area where you may be competing against each other, but being brave enough to go forward because you know it's the right thing to do. I'm curious, were there struggles to get the group together, or have there been incredible joys that you can share with us from the beginnings of this coalition?
Yeah, I think first getting together and how we got together just for coffee and learning felt less riskier. And then as we started talking, it was like, okay, there could be risk. Like if I share this with you, does that risk my funding? And then it's a no, all it's doing, so a lot of funders would tell some of them, you need to go talk to scores because we do evaluation really well. And so, of course, if a funder is saying, go talk to scores, I want to open my books, but if I don't trust you, I may not do that. So there was a lot of trust in there. And I think from the get-go, just us understanding that piece. And I know that is not common because I've also been a part of coalitions and collaborations that don't trust each other and nothing really moves forward. A thing for us, a big win that we had was we all decided to invest in that phase one of the Positive Coaching Alliance equity study. This is not a free study. It's a 18-month work and it's costly. However, we decided phase one was going to be funded by all of us. And that was a risk to say here's for each organization $2,000 when this could be going somewhere else, but we thought it was really important. And then because we did all of that, we actually just got funded some of the coalition work by Bruning Foundation is funding two and three. The risk there is we're all funded by Bruning on the outside, so we want this to do well. And then we got funding for what comes next from the LA 84 Foundation because coalition work is not just in I mean, there's cities, dozens of cities doing it, and some have 10 years behind them, especially around youth sports. And learning from them has been great. Like I'm on a sports equity call now around sports equity across the United States. And so those have been the big wins. And it's exciting. I feel like within like 2 days, I was able to like get the coalition work moved ahead because people like that work. While also still, we're all at capacity, and that's hard too. We're all five very small grassroots organizations. And so, this is extra to our normal day jobs. But, we meet once a month and it hasn't been an issue yet. But I think as time goes, I'm sure, and we've had disagreements about where do we focus, what do we do, but we can come to it as like we're trying to use a lot of research data to make that decision because we may not all agree. So.
Yeah, and that's all part of it, right? And that's hopefully healthy disagreements that just progress the work. So, um, with the rise of soccer in Cleveland, with the newly announced four-city team too, do you see any opportunity for collaborations or are some already underway?
Yeah, I think they are. I see some of my board members on here, and, I have board members kind of they're all over, right? This is what your board is for, to help be your reach when you can't be the reach. So, we've had conversations with Cleveland Pro Soccer. We have a good partnership and good working partnership with the people there. And I think for me, and I tell everybody this, I really don't care who comes into Cleveland for professional soccer. What I care about is our kids have access. So, World Cup is out of access for so many of our kids, and it's coming here to the United States, but it's so expensive. And so, if there's going to be professional teams in Cleveland, what I want to make sure is that Cleveland kids get to be a part of it, not a secondary thought. And I think they're doing that well. And so I think there is a lot of collaboration there, but I also think it just is going to up the game that kids are going to see soccer in a different way. Another thing I didn't, you saw those five sports. We're all not common sports. So, we're not the basketball, we're not the football, but we're exposing kids in very different way. And I think that also is why we work together because we recognize we're not the like mainstream sports, but we want to make sure that the kids have access. But I'm looking forward. I hope Cleveland, all the teams come in because I think, it just will elevate our kids and give them that opportunity to see more soccer and see soccer at a professional level.
Yeah, with this being World Cup time too, are there opportunities that can arise there for the students that are participating in American
Yeah.
sports?
Yeah. So Angela, right before I dropped this in on Angela, but so we are taking six kids to Boston. So everything around World Cup, there's always a thing called Festival 26, and it's a youth festival. And so what they do is they find a host city and then they bring kids from all over the world to play in soccer and do youth development and do a lot of cultural exchange. So we have six 14 to 17 year olds going. So they are going to get to play with kids from 24 different countries, delegations from all over. They're going to get to do all these fun, cool things in Boston and get to experience it. Unfortunately, typically they do go to a World Cup game. However, because of how expensive World Cup is, they cannot secure tickets for all the kids. So that they're going to they'll get to be a part of the fan fest and all of the things, and they're still working through it. But yeah, I mean, the kids are really excited because now we get to see how soccer in this global sport, and they may not speak a language the same as another kid that's going to be on their team because they're all going to be mixed up too into different teams, but they're going to get to play soccer. And I'm really excited to see them. And, we just got word from Columbus Crew is going to help support the kids getting there and traveling because once they're there, everything's paid for, and Columbus Crew is going to sponsor the kids getting there as well. So, we do have a good partnership with Columbus Crew. Unfortunately, they're just not here in Cleveland, so they have a very different market. But this, they really wanted to support because of World Cup. There's the friendly game coming, so we're also trying to get kids to that friendly game happening on June 6th between Brazil and Egypt. So working through that. Again, I am all about if our kids can get to go to anything, I'm going to try to get them to those events. So that is what we're doing. And then we'll do some fun things like just as an organization around World Cup watch parties. But, running our soccer, program all summer long and tying World Cup into that.
Yeah, that's so cool. And to be able to create that opportunity out of the language of sport is really unique.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So your funding model is so interesting. And the fact that you can provide this for free to schools and the families who need it. Can you talk a little bit more about that funding structure?
Sure. Yes. So we seem big. People think Scores is a very big organization. Our annual budget comes out to about between 650 to $700,000 a year. So that's a pretty small budget to be in 17 schools. We do get a lot of foundation. So we're about 25% from foundations and philanthropy. We have corporate support through different grants from local companies as well as fundraising events we get. We do some earned income. So our summer programming, a community partner will pay us to come in to do programming with them. We also have some government funding. So our government funding is mainly Cuyahoga Arts and Culture to support poetry, Ohio Arts Council, and then we have some county dollars through like the Health and Human Services levy, which is funneled through Starting Point. So those are our big pockets, but we also have about 10% of our budget is individual donors as well. So that is how we are free, and we keep a very tight overhead. So, and not having a facility and running directly on school grounds also helps keep that cost down because we're not trying to bus kids to us. We're really going right where the kids are. And, I will say, schools are the way to go when you're trying to meet kids and really have quality program because it means you don't have to spend all that money on transportation. And we know that's a big barrier for the kids. The biggest transportation cost we hit is we do bus some of our kids to their game days if it's too far out of their neighborhood. So, so yeah, it's very diverse, and I have a great board and a great finance committee that is ensured that we are diverse, so that when funding streams change, I think there's some nonprofit leaders on here, and funding at a drop of a hat, you could think you're going to get something, and then they change priorities, and you're sitting there looking at like, how am I going to fill that? And so it's been good to have a diverse income because then we've been able to be very steady, and we've taken anything we can, and we try to have a rainy day fund, and that in the last 4 years, I'm just incredibly thankful we've been able to do that so that this year where it feels a little bit more challenging for nonprofits, we've been able to say, no, we can keep running as we are because we do have some cushion to the budget. So yeah, that is our funding.
Yeah, thank you. So what can us on the call do to support you, to support the coalition as it's sort of in its beginning phases? And, clearly it seems like there's some good momentum here. So what can we do to get
Yeah.
involved?
So I mean, for Scores, I will always say you can get involved, you can volunteer if you really want to coach. We pay our coaches, but they run after school. Any support, we have events coming up. If you're a soccer player and you want to come out to Scores Cup, which is we're calling it the mini World Cup for Cleveland. That's at the end of April. So you can come out and play, and you can either email me or you can go to our website and sign up. And I think with the coalition, if you're involved in sports or there is this sport happening in the city of Cleveland, but somehow, it's localized to a neighborhood and we don't know about it, we want to know about it because we want to make sure people are at the table as we really do think about setting that equity agenda. We're not doing it alone, the 5 organizations. We just, for a long time, we're coming together to have coffee. And now we're trying to bring more people in to say, how do we do this? So I think if anybody's really intrigued in that work, let me know because we're starting slow and we're starting very focused because we also recognize if we focus on everything, nothing will get done. So we're hoping to hyper focus a little bit. So yeah, that's how people, come on out and support. You can even come out to a game day. You can ref the kid. We don't keep score at Scores. Um, the kids will keep score. We do not keep score. So please come out. We would love to have everybody involved.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for giving us some insight, some inspiration into how to do this trust building among leaders in Cleveland. And thank you for paving the way. It's a great example of coalition and trust building.